Let's call this meeting to order. Good evening. It is 6 p.m. and the May 4th special meeting of the Dublin Cinema and Services District Board of Directors is called to order. Let's move to item 2 and pledge the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Item 3, roll call. Nicole.
Director Goel?
Present.
Director Duarte?
Here.
Director Von Heater-Leopold?
Here.
Vice President Govindarao?
Here.
President Halkett?
I'm here. Thank you very much. Item 4, special announcements and activities.
No special announcements.
Good answer. All right. Item 5, public comment. Meeting open to the public. I have no speaker cards, anything remote or online.
No speaker cards.
All right, we'll move on to item 6, agenda management.
Staff is asking to defer item 10A, the closed session, until May 17th.
Works for me. Okay, item 7, consent calendar. Second here while I navigate. Okay, these items were typically taken, non-controversial, taken as a whole. Do I have a motion for the consent calendar?
The motion forward.
Well, second.
All right, get that? First, second, there we go. All in favor?
Aye.
5-0, none opposed. Okay. Second here. Item 8A, board business, or 8, board business 8A. Public hearing, consider establishing local and regional wastewater rates under Chapter 5.30 of the District Code and rescinding resolution number 14-23. The recommended action is to hold a public hearing and adopt the resolution. We have all reviewed the agenda materials, including the written objections received and the district responses. Are there any concerns or objections from the board to proceeding with the scheduled public hearing? Hearing none, I will assume we're okay. I declare the public hearing open. All right. The board will first receive a staff presentation, followed by public comments. If you wish to address the board, please complete a speaker card and submit it to the district secretary before the end of the presentation. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Staff.
Good evening, President Halkett, members of the board. This evening, staff is asking the board to consider adopting a 5-year schedule of rate increases for the wastewater enterprises. I'm joined this evening by the finance team, Jaden Sanga, the district's finance director, T. Lucero, the district's financial analyst, and Kevin Lorenzen, the project manager from HDR Engineering, the consultant that we hired to prepare the cost of service study. This evening's presentation, I'll provide some brief introductory remarks, and then Kevin Lorenzen will review the wastewater cost of service study and proposed rate increases, and Jaden Sanga will discuss the district's compliance with Proposition 218, including protest and written objection procedures, followed by staff's recommendations. The 2026 cost of service study aligns with the district's strategic plan goal of long-term financial stability and sustainability, which states that the district's goal is to manage the district's finances to meet funding needs and maintain fair and reasonable water and wastewater rates. This process began when the board adopted the 2-year operating capital budgets back in June of 2025. At that time, the board and staff discussed financial pressures on the wastewater enterprises, and the board directed staff to accelerate a cost of service study to address those financial pressures. Based on the board's direction, we hired HDR Engineering to prepare the cost of service study, and the preliminary results were shared with the board at the June 20th, 2026 meeting. Based on the feedback we received from the board at that meeting, we made some minor adjustments to the cost of service study and the schedule of rate adjustments. Those were presented to the board on February 17th. After receiving the presentation at that meeting, the board authorized staff to set a public hearing for May 4th and also to distribute the Proposition 218 notice. Those notices were distributed to all property and tenant-occupied properties as of March 4th. And tonight, this evening, is the public hearing for the board to consider adopting those rate increases. And if adopted, those rate increases would become effective on July 1st. As I mentioned during the preparation of the budget, there were a number of financial pressures identified on the local and regional wastewater enterprises, both on the revenue and the expense side. On the revenue side, DSRSD is approaching build-out, which means that revenues are growing at a slower pace, and that also directly correlates to decreased revenues from capacity reserve fees or new connections to our wastewater system, which partially fund our capital replacement needs. And then on the expense side, there were a number of cost categories that are increasing, and two of the more significant ones are energy and chemicals. Energy has increased 30% over the last 4 years, and chemicals have increased 150% over the last 3 years. And those behind personnel, those are two of the largest cost categories for our wastewater enterprise. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you. So go ahead and, there we go. So for this study, we looked at the local and regional systems. The plan was to develop a financially sustainable analysis for both that would fund both the operating and capital needs, and to establish rates for the next 5 years using prudent financial planning criteria, as well as using generally accepted methodologies. A big part of this was also to meet the requirements for Prop 218, which is proportional rates, and also develop the administrative record, which was the final report. So Prop 218, 40 years ago, in the lay of the land, or the law of the land since then, it requires that fees be reasonable and proportional for providing cost of service. And we do this by conducting the cost of service analysis. And ultimately, the average unit cost that's developed in the cost of service is how the foundation of the rates are established, and that's what it gives us our proportionality. So the three-step process in a rate study is the revenue requirement, which takes the projected revenue, compares that to the projected expenses to determine whether rates are sufficient to meet the district's financial needs. The next step is the cost of service. The cost of service then takes the revenue requirement and proportionally distributes those costs to each customer class. And then finally, the rate design. The rate design takes both the revenue requirement and the cost of service to establish rates for the next 5 years. So overview of the revenue requirement. As we talked about, the revenue is projected out for 10 years, although we're only setting rates for 5. But we project that out using the current rates growing at the customer's growth rate, or the district's growth rate, using the number of accounts. And also is the O&M expenses. That was based on the 26-27 operating budget. We projected that forward through 2035 using historical trends and inflationary levels, as well as some known and measurable changes that were needed to be made. The next part of it is the capital funding section. So capital is primarily funded through a transfer from the working capital fund to the replacement fund for local transfer is $1,000 annually. And that's what for the regional, we're actually restoring some funding up to its current level of $2.8 million and increasing thereafter at 3%. Also, for this study, we looked at issuing some debt in 2031 And in the process of doing that, the debt service for that would be about $1 million. And we're paying for that through through a transfer from the replacement fund. Results. Here is the revenue requirement results presented in this chart for the regional system. And you can see that there's bars and there's the lines. So the bars represent the costs. So the biggest part of the bar is that O&M expense. And then you can see the line. The dotted line represents the revenues at present rates. So if you didn't adjust the rates at all, that's what would happen is you'd start to outpace your revenue. And then the solid line represents our proposed rate adjustments. And you can see that we're meeting the overall revenue requirement over that period of time given those particular rate adjustments, 5 and then a 4. This chart or diagram is a broad overview of how our revenue or our cost of services is determined. So again, we're taking that revenue requirement, we're splitting those costs up into volume, BOD, and suspended solids. And so then after we have allocated those costs to those different cost components, we then proportionally distribute those costs to the different customer classes. So that middle part of that diagram is the allocation of the revenue requirement. You can see here in this pie chart, this is how the results of the allocation went. We had 60% of the costs were allocated to volume, 28% to suspended solids, and 12% to biochemical oxygen demand. And those proportions were based on an assessment of the treatment plant and looking at the functional purposes of those particular pieces. Results of the cost of service are presented here. You can see overall the revenue for each of the different customer classes. There are some minor differences that existed that were shown in the cost of service. There's a little bit of a gap between the blue and the green line. And then ultimately, again, one of the major results of the cost of service is cost. So how we're establishing the per unit cost. The volume, we have our allocated cost of $17 million. We divide that through by the 5 million CCF, and that's where we get our $3.03 per CCF. And that same goes for BOD and TSS, which ultimately yields 37 cents per pound and 69 cents per pound. These are the key factors in the proportionality for the rates that we developed for the study. So for the most part, the rate structure remained the same. There were very minor differences. So what we really adjusted was the level of the rates. So how much revenue will be generated. Residential, remained a bi-monthly fixed charge. Commercial remained a volume charge based on the 6 different strength bands. Dura remained. Separate out San Francisco Public Utility Commission from the septic haulers because of the much lower strength level. So we created a rate structure just for the. Here are the regional rates. You can see that top line, from the current rates to the 2026 rates. It's about a $4 change. You can see that $4 change kind of continues in the next year, and then it kind of shifts down to about $3 bi-monthly. Each of the different residential other rates, the duplex, multifamily, and also single family with the second dwelling unit, those are all proportional to that single family rate. Here is the current non-residential rates. These are the 6 strength bands that we were just talking about, and these were not adjusted for this study. There are some differences that maybe proportionally have changed due to the different results of the cost of service, but in large, no big differences. For DURWA and the others, those structures, well, DER will remain the same. You know, we have our dollars per million gallons and dollars per pound for TSS and BOD. SFPUC, you can see that there's that pretty big difference between SFPUC and the septic haulers, where the rate's much less for SFPUC. And that's again as a result of the much lower strength level compared to a septic hauler. Here is the working cash or working capital charts. We've seen this before. The first chart represents the working capital balances that were projected out at the time that the budget was adopted. And the next chart is an updated chart that shows after the rate adjustments what those balances are looking at. So the green bars represent the ending balances, while the blue and orange represents the low and the target levels. So you can see if you're in between those two lines, that's where you really want to be. And for this regional system, we're over that 10-year period. Again, we're only adopting rates for 5 years, but we're now at 10 years here. You can see we're trending up towards that blue line, which is the target. Now shifting to the local wastewater system. Again, we have our revenue requirement chart here with our expenses being the bars and our revenue being the lines. You can see the dotted line again. It's a pretty flat line, so over time, if no rate adjustments were made, you would start to, your expenses would exceed your revenue. And you can see here also we have our rate adjustment. They're 3% per year, which is pretty modest, roughly in a as far as the cost of service for the local system, it's much more simplified because there's no strength-related components to the local system, because it's only transmitting the wastewater to the wastewater treatment plant. Allocation of cost is based on the volume cost. So we're just taking that revenue requirement and then dividing that cost amongst the different customer classes based on their proportionate share of the volume. Getting to the cost of service results for the local system. Again, no changes here. There's some minor differences for each of these customer classes, but not substantial. And then here we are at the rates. So again, you can look at that top line, which is our single family, and you can see that it's going up at just over $1 for that first year for a bi-monthly period. So not a big are at the working capital charts again. You can see on the left we have our, the chart is represented at the time that the budget was adopted. So you can kind of see the bars, which represent the ending fund balance. You can see how that's declining over time. And then if you look at the next chart on the right, you can see this is the chart that we're looking at with these proposed rate adjustments. You can see again we're kind of trending down, but we're staying within those the green and red line, which target. So if you look at it on a combined basis for a single family, you can see with the local and regional $80 at the current rates, and we $93 over this period. $4.64. You know, if you look at it at a monthly basis, $2.32. So it's really not that big of an adjustment. Multifamily, also looking at a little bit of an increase, not a huge increase. It's $3.59 on average increase per year on a bi-monthly basis. And so on here you can see that actually at the bottom we have the percent changes on a year-to-year basis. So the first year non-residential or commercial, however you want to call it. This chart represents the combined impact for for that type of customer. And this is looking at, the lowest strength level at 135 CCF bi-monthly. And it's an increase. It's a little bit more substantial than the residential results. It's 9.7%. Here's our rate comparison. These are a comparison to other agencies in the Alameda Costa County area. You can see that at the top we have $1,298, and then we look at the bottom, we can see a very low of $486, and just above the lowest is DSRSD. So currently $530 annually. And after these rate adjustments, it's going to go up to $559 annually. So pretty much at the bottom of all your peers. Hand it
All right.
over.
Thank you, Kevin. Good evening, President Halkett, members of the board. Jaden Sanga, Director of Finance for DSRSD. So next we'll take a look at the Prop 218 process, including the public notice and opportunity for the property owners to formally object or protest to the wastewater cost of services study. And this process ensures transparency and give customers a meaningful opportunity to take part in the rate setting process here at DSRSD. This slide here goes over our public notice effort. Prop 218 public hearing notices were mailed out to all property owners and tenants on March 4th, 2026. We also set up a dedicated web page on DSRSD.com. That page includes a public hearing notice, cost of service study, and also a set of frequently asked questions for customers. Public notices were also included in the district pipeline newsletter on April 1st, and we also published classified ads in the Valley Times on April 20th and again on April 27th. This slide here walks through our full Prop 218 schedule, including the new steps we now have to follow under Assembly Bill 2257. Back in February, the board gave staff the authorization to mail the public hearing notices on March 4th. The written objections were due by April 27th, which is at least 45 days after the public hearing notices were sent out. And staff reviewed every objection and prepared written responses. Those responses are included in tonight's agenda packet, and staff also directly responded to customers who objected to our rate increases. In addition to objections, ratepayers can still submit formal written protests up until the close of tonight's public hearing. So overall, with this timeline, DSRSD has met all requirements for both Prop 218 and AB 2257. On this slide here, we have a status of the protests and objections that we received so far. District has total 29,212 parcels in our service area, and we count one protest per parcel. That means the number of protests required tonight to reach a majority protest is 14,607. As of noon on Monday, April 30th, we received 11 customer responses, 9 email protests, and 2 objections. First objection raises financial hardship concerns and also saying that the rate increases might affect households' budget. And the second objection claims that the proposed rates exceed the cost of service and the costs were not allocated proportionately. Staff and our legal counsel reviewed both objections carefully and prepared written responses. And again, those responses are included as attachment 4 of today's agenda packet. And we also sent the responses directly to the customers who submitted those objections. Staff and our legal counsel have determined that the allegations of non-compliance stated in second objection are unsubstantiated in our wastewater cost of service study, and the study comprehensively demonstrates how the proposed wastewater rates were developed and the analysis was completed in compliance with Article 13D, Section 6 of California law. Therefore, the 2 submitted objections do not result in any changes to the proposed wastewater rates. And at the end, we have the recommendation for the board tonight. Staff makes the recommendation for the board to hold a public hearing as required under Prop 218. Under Assembly Bill 2257, staff responses to the 2 received objections are included in tonight's staff report. Given total number of customer responses received at the end of the public hearing tonight, no majority protest exists, and no further modification or review is required to the proposed wastewater rates. And staff makes the recommendation for the board to adopt the proposed wastewater rates by resolution. If approved, the new rates will be in effect July 1st of 2026. And with that, I conclude the presentation. Happy to take any questions.
All right, the board will now receive public comments. Each speaker has 5 minutes to address the board. I think we're okay there. I have 0 speaker cards, and the first speaker is nobody. There we go. You did that. Trying to follow the script exactly. A determination about whether there's a successful majority protest needs to be made prior to the board's deliberation on the wastewater rate proposal. Now comes the magic language. The board's policy on Proposition 218 written protests, written objections, and exhaustion of administrative remedies provides that written protests submitted to the district by mail, fax, email, or dropped off, except during the public hearing, must have been received or withdrawn by close of business 5 p.m. today. Policy allows the receipt of written protest delivered in person through the close of the public hearing. Does anyone present who has not yet done so wish to submit or withdraw a written protest? The public hearing is now closed. Will the district secretary please state how many apparent written protests have been received?
In accordance with the Proposition 218 written protests, written objections, and exhaustion of administrative remedies policy, a total of 10 apparent written protests have been received.
Excellent. In order for a protest to be deemed successful, a majority of protests of the district's 29,212 parcels, or 14,607 protests, must have been submitted. Therefore, the number of apparent written protests totaling 10 is unsuccessful, and under the policy, there's no need for the district secretary to validate the apparent written protests. The board may now proceed with its deliberations on wastewater rate proposal. All right, have at it, folks. Start on the right. Anything?
Well, first of all, I think commend the staff on the thoroughness of the report. It's apparent to me that I think we've done everything in compliance with all of the laws required. As a taxpayer and as a business owner, no one likes rate increases, and that's becoming the norm now. I think the only comment I would like to state would be, I would hope that the district staff would take a long, hard look at the 8-year future here and address those two comments that were at the beginning: the revenue versus the build out. We're not gonna continue to get the money that we've always gotten, and that in the outside real world of business, that means you either cut service or you do something internally to cut costs. And we talk about we have no control over PG&E. We have no control over the chemicals. We do have some control over our labor costs. And that's an unpleasant subject that no one ever likes to talk about, because it can involve anything from no raises. And when I say raises, every month it seems like we're automatically approving a 5% here, a 5% there, and nobody ever pays attention to the COLA. The cost of living adjustment is automatic in public service. At least that's what I see in my 50 years of being a public works contractor. It's just another word for a raise. So when you get a cost of living adjustment as a wastewater treatment operator or a administrative aide in the district, you're getting a raise. It may be only 2.2%, but it's a raise. In an outside world, we don't automatically do that, because if we did, we'd go broke. When times get tough, when times get lean, you have to address anything and everything that you can possibly look at to cut the cost of operation. So I just hope that the district staff recognizes that, and I'm only here for 7 more months, and I'm not coming back. I'm going to stay retired. But I'll say this at every meeting if I have to. I appreciate what our employees do, but right now, folks, our staff, our workforce, in the grand scheme of things, no, they're not getting paid like East Bay Mud, but we're not East Bay Mud, and we don't live in that core metro area around the Bay Area. We should be able to operate at a lesser cost. I don't mean significant, but somewhat. So I just want you to think about that. And in this time frame that I'm talking about, take a look at your org chart. How many positions do we really need? Do we really need now, as opposed to how many we're going to need 10 years from now? Because that day is coming when that revenue is going to be way down, and we just can't keep raising rates and raising rates. It's not sustainable. It's my speech.
Thank you, sir.
I have to go after that? Yeah, I will.
It was a stem winder, but you can do it.
It is a stem winder.
I mean, you know what you're doing.
So, I respect my director's opinions, and I'll be making my own statements. But I do want to get some clarity to make sure that we're on page and in sync. So I do know that the board clerk did read off 10 protests. However, I do believe on page 38 it indicated 11, which it means potentially an update.
Thank you, Director Goyle. Yeah, there was a protest received on Friday, late on Friday, so that makes it 11. So there's total 11 total protests.
So
combined.
Do we need to have the record cleared from the statement of the clerk? Okay.
So just to clarify, my report does not include the written objection that was received. I was just referring to the protests themselves. So there's a difference, and there was an additional protest that came in, which is captured in the 10. I'm not including the objection.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I just want to make sure that we cross T's, dot I's on any statements we're making to the public as part of this process. The other thing was on the rate comparison. I forgot what slide number that was. I think it's slide number 33. That was last updated on 12/29/25. Do we have any new information, or is it static since then?
That was when we captured and pulled the numbers, but we are aware that a number of agencies are in the process right now of adjusting rates as well. And sort of the average we're seeing around the Bay is about anywhere from like 6 to 15%. Most of these agencies are adjusting rates to address the new nutrient requirements, plus a capital replacement needs.
So is it feasible to say that Oraloma and the city of Pleasanton may have adjusted since this publication, or are anticipating to?
With the city of Pleasanton pays our regional rate. So once if the board so chooses to adopt these rates, those will be passed on to the city of Pleasanton. So city of Pleasanton on this chart will adjust. And then Oraloma is currently in the middle of a 5-year rate adjustment that is 15% per year over the 5-year period.
So theoretically, city of Pleasanton's delta would take them right back above us, and we would still retain our position of second from the bottom.
Correct.
Okay. And the only reason why I'm bringing that forward is, and it's partially out of respect to you, Director Duarte, and some of your feedback and comments about what we're seeing and what we're doing. And I know staff did do a summary, but I kind of want to just go through my listening perspective of it and ensure that I'm hearing stuff correctly. So with objections and protests out of the net total consumer potential parcels, it's less than a 0.1% of opposition or objections. And I think that's important to note. because on page 150 of our package to 151 was the formal communication that was issued as a result of a thorough communication plan to ensure that we're reaching out to all ratepayers and ensuring that we're educating them on the process to allow them to come forward as part of tonight's process to ensure that their voices are heard. To me, this is a very, very important mantra of this board about communication, education, and keeping our ratepayers fully informed. On the opposition type, it seemed like most of the oppositions tended to be of residential in nature, of which the net increase, depending on the classification, was anywhere between 5.5 to 5.9%. Do I have any of that inaccurate in my statements? Seems like pretty much a good recap.
Yeah, that's all correct.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I think the other key piece, and I do want to indicate to staff, I am on a different page than Director Duarte, so no disrespect for you, sir. I do appreciate the vantage point, but I do want to share from my tenure on the board, and I know you, sir, have had a long tenure as well, and so I do respect all of your statements. You know, the COLA, yes, you could consider it a raise, but it is cost of living. And one of the things that we as a board and staff, I believe, have been doing constructively all the way throughout my tenure at least, is ensuring that we're keeping lowest cost while keeping operational viability and quality of service with the quality of the product that we provide our customers. That to me is paramount. It's a balance. It's a delicate balance. The regulations are changing, and there's stuff that are uncontrollable. Regarding the org chart, there have been vacancies, and we've been filling some vacancies, but we still stay below our demanded third-party evaluation on where our organization should staff at. And I believe our leadership and the staff have made a very effective job at ensuring that the operational cost is maintained while ensuring that we maintain our quality of service. So I do appreciate our staff. It's not that I just want to toot my horn, but there is a thorough process on every step of everything we do. And I want to make sure that the ratepayers, those who are hearing this, hear that our functional fiduciary requirement is to ensure operational costs are low while maintaining quality of service while ensuring regulatory compliance. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Smith. All right. Joke.
Okay, let's go well.
Huh?
Let's go well.
I don't know how I can
It's not moving,
possibly
right?
follow that.
All right. Who wants to go next?
I'll go.
All right.
I think. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, I do agree with Board Member Duarte that we do have to look at ways to cut costs, which I believe we're doing as best we can. The things that we have some control over, we have no control over in reality, and that's the cost of electricity and power, and then the cost of the chemicals. With regard to wages, I have struggled for 25, 30 years with this question because I believe in order to maintain that level of quality, we need quality employees. And in order to get quality employees, we have to compensate them so that they don't run to another agency and we lose the price. So it's definitely at a delicate balance, and I think for the most part we've done fairly well over the years. I'm really pleased with the accuracy and the depth of this report. I appreciate all the additional explanations that went into everything. I know our ratepayers will never read it, but if necessary, you pull it out and you show them. and hope they understand what's being said. But I don't have any questions about anything. I've followed this long enough to know these costs are reasonable, and therefore the rate increase is reasonable. That's all.
Very much.
So I will have a lot of folks to follow here with these comments. So I'm trying. As I'm processing what all of you are saying. I mean, definitely, respect everyone's thoughts and their vantage points on what they're bringing up on this rate increase. A couple things. I just had a question before I kind of address one thing that I'd want. I'm gonna kind of ask the easy one and then more the tougher one afterwards. But what I wanted to understand is, so we are at a point where we're at the build out, getting close to the build out, from what I understand. But there's still, like, for example, I think like Francis Ranch and some of these other areas. When we were doing our revenue and our cost, did we take those into account when those projections, what that will bring to us from both aspects?
We did. So we're probably about 15% away from build out. And so we've taken a more conservative approach in our budget. So yes, the answer is yes. We have included Francis Ranch and all the areas that we know. We coordinate very closely with the city of Dublin for those projections.
Great, thank you. And to kind of just expand on Director Duarte's comments, when I was just I was looking at doing the math on this quickly, and while we were doing the presentation, and when we look at the rate increases over the 5-year period, we're looking somewhere between a 26 to 37% increase. So if we look, and that's just doing the simple math here, when we look at CPI rises roughly about 2.5%, 3% a year. So my question is how can we get closer to being in that range versus us always being ahead of it? And I get there's other costs and they're not always comparing apples to apples, but when you look at it from a ratepayer perspective, they're going to be looking at it that way. So I think if for us, I agree, we do a good job with maintaining costs, looking at quality, but I think it's also looking at opportunities for additional cost containment. And I think kind of what Director Duarte was getting at. I mean, so those are some things I think, for us to continue to look at those opportunities and address some of those potential strategies on how we can get there. But I do commend the staff on, I know everyone looks at this very closely. You spend a lot of time and very detail oriented, and really appreciate the work that you put into this. And but I'm looking to see if there's other things that we could potentially do. We can't keep doing this forever, and so we have to figure out ways on how we can manage this going forward. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. All right. Is there a motion to approve the resolution proposed under item 8A?
Oh, you have any comments?
No, I'm fine. You guys said all.
I'll move approval.
I have a motion.
And I'll second.
All right, you second that motion. That's good. Okay, I have a motion by GVH, second by Director Goel, to adopt resolution for 8A. Let's have a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Well, sounds like a 5-0 to me. I think we're okay there. Mr. Cody, have I fulfilled all the requirements I need to fulfill with this new 218 script?
And more.
And more? Oh, that's not good. And more's not the answer I was looking for. All right. Well done, folks. And well done, staff. Never pleasant, but we got to keep the lights on. All right. Going to item 9. Reports. Board member items 9A. So we're going to go into 9A1 first, which is Joint Powers Authority and Committee reports. I believe we had a Durham meeting 27th. Anybody who
Go ahead.
want to go to the Durham meeting?
So, Director Von Heater, Leopold, and myself attended the Durham meeting on 4/27. A couple things that we did is we approved and adopted the fiscal year 2026-2027 operating and capital budget. It was a 7.505 million. It was a decrease of 198,608 from the previous year. And we also authorized the authority manager to execute on agreement with the California Sanitation Risk Management Authority for property insurance. I think historically in the past, DSRD was picking up the tab for that. So that's being looked at now and addressed. So it'll be off our books and on the Duro books. And that's all I have, unless Director One of your reliable.
I just have one comment. That amount that we have been picking up since day one right now is $50,000. So I kind of joked in my sarcastic way with Director Luz Gomez that sort of made up for the fact that we haven't been able to produce enough recycled water for them. She agreed. So, but that's a lot of years of paying for the insurance. And we had just always included the equipment, the property in our rate, or not our rate, our fee. So anyway, I just wanted to add that additional thing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see, only one for 9A1. We'll go to 9A2. Submittal of written reports of days of service, events attended by directors. Written reports are due this evening. Anyone have any? I started this way, so I'm going to start over there because we almost always have one there.
Yeah. The only one I have was the CASA board meeting, and the only thing we did was the same thing that the CASA Finance Committee did the prior week, and that was to go over the audit and to go over the budget. So there really wasn't anything new added to that report. We do have a new general counsel. For the life of me, I can't remember the name. By any chance, do you know? Okay, well, CASA has a new general counsel, and that's all I have to report.
Excellent. Anything from you? All righty. 9A2 is dispensed with. 9A3, request for new agenda items to be placed on future board or committee agenda. Anyone have any? First.
Excuse me, there is one additional thing that wasn't on the DERWA agenda. I asked that we put a review of the general manager to go over with our attorney, put that on the next agenda. We're probably going to have a special meeting in order to do that so that we don't spread this out till December.
So just so I'm clear, this is DURA.
Correct.
Okay. So nothing for our agenda coming up, looks like. All right, 9A3 I can dispense with. 9B, staff reports. Oh, yes, several.
Just a couple. The Aqua Conference is May 5th through the 7th, and we have a couple board meetings headed up to Sacramento tomorrow for that conference. And then the LAVMA board meeting is May 20th here in the boardroom. I think hopefully folks got the message that the Pleasanton DSRSD liaison meeting has been postponed at Pleasanton's request.
And I'm on the hook for LAVMA, right?
You are on the hook for LAVMA.
520.
So the cancellation that we received is disregarded. The one that is happening is the one we received as well. We have it was like in and out.
Oh, okay.
So it is happening.
Got it.
Are you talking about for LAVMA?
Yeah.
I don't handle the communications for LAVMA, so I'm not exactly sure what the board saw on that one.
Awesome. All right. Anything else? Wow. Not bad. All right. Closed session, item 10. We're going to move to a future meeting. So we're not going to do the microphone meeting thing. It's not going to be a report from closed session. The board's in open session. We never were in closed session, so I can skip that part too. I think, unless anybody else has anything, I can bang this gavel and we can call tonight. All right, meeting's adjourned.